And blessed to be a part of your day. Now that the Olympics are over, let's go to Will Roger, who's joining us. Dr. Roger, thank you for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me. It was quite the Olympics, lots of cool stuff, but now back to politics, right?
Indeed. So let's talk a little bit about the Charles Koch Institute and your thoughts on North Korea.
Yeah, I mean, there was quite the charm offensive by the North Koreans during the Olympics. Kim sending his sister down there, and then, of course, President Trump sending Ivanka. But I think what's going to happen is that we're going to get back to politics. It's going to be back to the kind of bumpy times we saw before, because really what you have is two irreconcilable interests right now. And until that changes, we're not going to see a change, right? Kim wants nuclear weapons as a trump card for his regime's survival, and the U.S. is insisting on North Korean denuclearization. So it's going to really be hard to square that circle.
Right, and, what a circle it is. Can you give us what we know, sir, what you know about North Korea? And we know that they have a lot of nuclear weapons, they starve their people, and the Kim family has been running wild there for quite some time.
Yeah, it's an awful regime. It's horrible. It's one of those places that really can't engage with the modern world. It does not practice the kind of economic policies that even the Soviet Union realized it needed. It needed to open up and become part of the world. And North Korea is a hermit nation, right? It's one of these countries that just continues with that communist dictatorship that just fails its people. And what's amazing is that there's this cult there of the leadership. So a pretty bad place. But again, there are a lot of bad places and have been in history. The question is what does the United States need to do to make itself safer when dealing with these countries.
Will Ruger joining us as we continue on. So why is North Korea, a country that starves its people so much, pretty much scaring the heck out of everybody?
Well, this is a country with a very different kind of operating system, if you will, a very different ideology than the kind of liberal democratic system that most of the rest of the world has been pursuing. And that's led to these very bad effects. And this is one of the reasons why states have to be very careful about pursuing those types of economic policies. It leads to bad results. And we're fortunate to live in a place that's a relatively free market. But again, the problem is for us, how do we deal with those states? Because it's going to be very hard to change them in a military fashion, given that the military options are all quite bad for the U.S.
Well, we're the United States of America. Can't we just bomb them like we've done everything else?
Well, those efforts have not proven all that successful over the last 15 to 25 years. If it were only that easy, right? And I'm a realist. I look at the world as it is and think about the constraints we face, even though we're a great power. And you look at it, they have a nuclear weapon. They have a strong conventional force. War would likely cost 30,000 to 300,000 dead, and those are some low estimates, according to some folks. So it could be pretty destructive. So I think we have to be really careful about how we engage. And that's why I think diplomacy and deterrence are the key, because deterrence will keep us safe, right? Our ability to be able to hit them so hard it would be suicidal on their side to attack us. That's going to keep us safe. The question is, what can we get beyond that? And that's where diplomacy, I think, comes in.
Dr. Ruger joining us as we continue on. Kevin Miller in the morning here at KIDO Talk Radio. But we could argue that diplomacy hasn't worked. We've seen what happened with North Korea under Bill Clinton and expanding their nuclear program. They seemingly, Dr. Ruger, pulled the bait and switch. We're going to be good North Koreans, and all of a sudden we have to worry about them proliferating nuclear weapons by selling them to the Iranians.
Well, yeah, I think we have to be careful not to be naive about what diplomacy can bring us. That being said, there are some steps that we could take that I think would make the situation a bit calmer, and perhaps then we can engage in steps that will get us closer to the ultimate results we want. One professor in South Korea has talked about the importance maybe of engaging with them on safety issues, because if they're going to have nuclear weapons, better for them to be safer rather than facing the potential of some kind of Chernobyl. So I think it's important to try to work with baby steps without being naive, but also being realistic about how the military option is just not there. I mean, people talk about how a bloody nose strike won't really do much. If Kim is as irrational as people say, will that unleash something that we can't contain? Does that mean a massive strike is necessary? And is that really sensible given what the costs are? I mean, lots of people in Washington, I think, that have supported more offensive actions in the past are saying this would be devastating. Victor Cha, for example, who was going to be the U.S. ambassador to South Korea until he was pulled, he's a fairly hawkish guy, but even he thought that this would be a bad problem.
What would it take, though, to stop North Korea? Something we haven't seen in quite some time. When we're talking about a first strike, I mean, we're not talking about a bloody nose. We're talking about, significant days of bombing, I would imagine. Well, hypothetically.
Again, that's the point. If we're talking about a massive campaign against North Korea, we have to remember that the enemy gets a vote, so to speak, in war. And that means that they would be also striking targets that would be to their advantage. And that could mean, like I said, lots of death and devastation. And one thing I always kind of bring it back to is that the kind of thing that's necessary for U.S. safety? Is it important for the United States to think about those costs, not just to South Koreans, but our troops in South Korea and the troops that would be brought in? If we're talking about a massive war like that, you have to think about it as this is something that's absolutely necessary for our survival, like World War II. And here's a case, I think, again, where deterrence can work. We worked with some of the worst regimes in history using deterrence as a way to make sure we were safe. Mao's China, Stalin's Russia, they had nuclear weapons, and yet we were able to deter them from attacking and ultimately won the Cold War without having to fire those shots.
Indeed. Of course, that doesn't seem to be working with North Korea, so there's no moderates in there because Kim kills everybody, though. So, I mean, again, when do we reach a point of no return when, we have people, even President Trump, saying we're not going to allow them to reach the West Coast and, they're firing missiles over Japan. So I guess what would we do as far as diplomacy 2.0 is my question that we haven't done in the past.
Well, I mean, I think certainly we need to make sure we clearly signal what our intentions, what our actions would be if there were such a launch. So, for example, during the Cold War, it was quite clear to the Soviet Union that if they launched a nuclear attack or a massive conventional attack on Europe, that we would then use all of our means possible, including our nuclear arsenal. So I think we have to make it very clear. In any kind of nuclear strategy, you have to have that clear signal being sent. But I think we have a history of being able to do that effectively. And again, I don't think that we're going to be able to make the world perfect. We're not going to necessarily, through deterrence, be able to make North Korea a better place. But the fact is that a war would be so devastating to the people we would ostensibly be trying to help in North Korea and also our allies in South Korea and our troops in South Korea that I think that we really should step back from thinking about that, especially since our track record over the last 15 to 25 years hasn't been that great. I mean, you think about Iraq, you think about Libya. These were cases where we're ostensibly trying to do well for people, but actually it made things worse. So that's why I think we ought to be quite careful.
Dr. Ruger, finally, what about a unified Korea? Could that ever happen?
Well, that's a really interesting question. One of the things about a unified North Korea or Korean Peninsula is that the North is so poor relative to the South. It would be even a harder problem than when East and West Germany combined. Not to mention the fact that the kind of ideology and the propaganda of the North has created a people with a very odd set of understandings and mindsets. And so I'm not sure that would work too well. The other thing is, what would the Chinese think, right? The Chinese wouldn't necessarily want a unified Korea, especially if that meant a unified Korea that was allied with the United States, because then you'd have those troops at the Yalu or near the Yalu. That was actually why China attacked the United States and the South during the Korean War. So I don't think China has an interest in that either. So I would expect more of the status quo ahead.
And finally, China's role in all this, sir.
Well, they're a critical regional player, and they're a lot more powerful than they were, back during the Korean War when our grandfathers were fighting over there. So it's something that they're going to have their thoughts, their interests are going to be part of this discussion. Clearly, they don't want a failed state on their border in the sense of having refugees pouring out of there. Again, they also don't necessarily want the United States to be right right close to them on that border if there is unification or if the United States did engage in warfare. So I think that their interests are going to be something that we're going to have to take quite seriously.
Dr. Ruger, if people want more information, what can they do? How can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, exactly. They can go to the website for the Charles Koch Foundation and Charles Koch Institute, www.charleskoch.org. And thanks for having me.
We'd love to have you back. A spirited discussion. We learned a lot this morning here in Idaho. Thank you, sir.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you very much. Have a nice day.
You too. Dr. Ruger joining us here. Do appreciate Ray Amaya setting that up. My name is Kevin Miller. Phone number's here, 580-5436. 580-KIDO. Now that the Winter Olympics are over, by the way, the lowest rated Olympics in quite some time. I don't know about you. I didn't really see any buzzworthy things going on, but we are getting back to business as usual. You know, Kim Jong will probably be firing missiles. And it was interesting to hear Dr. Ruger talk about diplomacy. And sooner or later, does diplomacy run out? Also, topping the stories, as you heard at the top of the hour from our great flagship, the Big Fox in New York, the issue involving the NRA. Now you have Hertz and others, all these companies pulling the NRA discounts. Now, my friends, at 580-5436, 580-KIDO, is that really going to stop? Is that really going to stop school shootings? And the president talking about expanded background checks and bump stocks and everything else. But when we are focused and taking a look at what happened, you have a deranged individual. You have one police officer who did not jump to the forefront and go in. And it's very easy to say, well, he should have gone in and shoot him up. That's what he signed up for. Again, little kids being killed, what do you do? The guy had an AR-15. Most of us would probably like to think that we would funnel our inner Chuck Norris and go in there and give him a kick. But it shows you the problem here with these situations. And, of course, we have the politicization of these kids, where we're treating the kids the same way we're treating adults, where you have an adult making an argument, and then you have a kid calling them a liar. I can't judge these kids. We can't judge these kids. But at 580-5436, 580-KIDO, our first question of the day reflects what's on our website at KIDOTalkRadio.com. By the way, we have an app very easily downloaded at the Android store and the Apple store, the App Store, and you can get KIDO Talk Radio at any time. But you take a look at that, and the question is, would you be comfortable if your sons or daughters' schools had armed guards? Now we're hearing across the area that there are churches that have secret security details. What about that with schools? And then you have a lot of teachers going, I don't want teachers armed. Well, is that up to them to decide, or is it up to the individual? Would you support armed guards at your kid's school? 580-5436, 580-KIDO. You're listening to Kevin Miller on KIDO Talk Radio. And armed guards in schools, that is the big question. We go to security guard Mike. Good morning. You're on KIDO Talk Radio.
Hey, Kevin, just before you left for your break, you brought up a point. I was wondering, is it if the teachers are told to be armed by the public, would it be up to them, or would it be part of their job description to be that? Because if the public's paying their salary, wouldn't they have to do what part of their job description is? Or would they have to rewrite the job description?
Well, actually, it's up to every local school board to make this happen. We had covered this in the past, security guard Mike, and I believe every local school board has the authority to vote that their teachers be armed and concealed carry in Idaho.
Well, okay, but if the teacher decides they don't want to do it, would that be going against their job description, or would they have to do it because even if they don't want to?
Well, I would say if they don't want to do it, I don't think you're going to get buy-in. And do you really want someone who doesn't want to carry a weapon armed?
Well, that's a good point. I just brought it up because you brought up a lot of questions in my brain, and so I thought I'd ask it because you're the smartest guy I know. So.
Well, I'm the question guy. I don't know if I'm the answer guy, but your thoughts on armed guards at schools?
Well, I think that armed guards at schools is a good idea, but I saw this thing on the YouTube about these schools that have these smoke bomb things that come out of the ceilings and stuff. And it's a $400,000 situation to purchase the security system, but it shoots smoke bombs out, and they have cameras all over the school, and then if they can track the shooter in live time and all that stuff, and then it just disorients the shooter until somebody can get in there to get it. So I'm not sure. I don't know what the exact answer is, but I think armed guards and security in the schools have been around for a little while. But, since the Columbine thing, haven't they been around for a little while and not work? It didn't work so good in Florida, I guess.
Well, I don't think there was an armed guard there. There might have been a school resource officer.
Was that it? Oh,
yeah,
okay.
but I don't think there was an armed guard. And, we can't fund education right now in the state of Idaho. Are we willing to pay more to keep our kids safe? It's a big issue, school safety these days.
I think you're right. And so anyway, I just thought if it was up to, if the public demanded that the teachers be armed, then they should do it as part of their job description. But if they don't individually want to do it, then they probably might not shouldn't. I don't know. It's a big conundrum. Anyway, hey, you're awesome, dude. That's why I thought I'd call you, because you're the best.
I'm just trying to keep up with you, brother.
All right. I appreciate you, Kevin, and I listen to you every day, and thank you for everything you do. Thank you for allowing us to have a voice in Idaho, and you're just the greatest, and I appreciate you. Have a great Monday, and we'll talk to you later, buddy.
Stay safe on the roads, brother.
Thank you, bud. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Let's get to traffic and weather together, and we continue on. Let's go to our friend Pete in Mountain Home at KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Pete.
Good morning, Kevin, and thank you for providing a chance for people to discuss this issue. One of the things that based on what I've heard of that sheriff in Florida, he's a political operative funded by Debbie Wasserman Schultz. And before you start thinking maybe you ought to condemn the deputies who didn't want to go in there, I am sure going through their minds was, if I go in there and I accidentally shoot a kid by mistake who's not the killer, the sheriff is going to throw me under the bus. And based on what the sheriff did to that resource officer, that's exactly what he's doing. He's throwing the deputies under the bus. So, and that, I think, is one of the reasons why the governor and others are calling for that sheriff's resignation. I would bet that department is not real happy with their sheriff.
Well, the sheriff didn't have a problem going on all the shows condemning the gun owners either. He sure jumped into the political fray fast.
It's all somebody else's fault, but you throw a guy into a situation like that, and the odds are that he might miss the perp and shoot an innocent bystander by mistake. And then that sheriff, if that happened, I'm sure they were thinking the sheriff he's going to hang me for that. He's going to just throw me under the bus. So that's one thing. The other one, I was listening on KIDO 580 at 107.5 FM to Tom Gresham's Gun Talk last night. And he was talking to several school superintendents, school board folks in rural areas who had thought about this since Columbine and have armed quite a few of their employees, not just teachers, but people who work in the school, have gotten very extensive training through their local law enforcement, 60 hours of training specifically on how to deal with an active shooter. And they have armed their people. There's a sheriff in Butler County, Ohio. My sister told me this. She lives back there, he offered free training to any school employee, and he got 300 people signed up. So I think in the rural areas, you will find people who work for the schools who would be happy to be able to defend themselves and their kids. You get into the big cities, and I think you're probably looking at more like bulletproof glass entry areas like they have in police stations, and more security that way, because I suspect it would be hard to find teachers in San Francisco who would be willing to carry a gun.
Well, Pete, thank you for the call and your observations on KIDO Talk Radio, and thanks for listening to Tom on Sunday nights.
Oh, you bet. It's a good program, just like all of the KIDO 580 programs are.
Well, thank you, brother. We need to put you on payroll.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, 580-5436, 580-KIDO. Tammy in Nampa. Good morning. You're on with Kevin Miller at KIDO Talk Radio. Hello, Tammy.
Hi. I've been told the Nampa schools have their schools locked, and you have to go to a window to get in. I don't know if it's the high schools or just the elementary schools, but why can't you do that in every school? And then someone has to go to a window in order to get in.
Right, a window they buzz you in or something like that?
Right, you have to go talk to someone at the window and say, I'm here to pick up so-and-so, or I'm here for this reason. So, I mean, and this is bad, if someone got shot, there'd only be one person, the window person, and that's bad to say, but at least the whole school wouldn't get shot up.
Indeed, I don't know if that's the case. I've been to a few schools, and it's very rare that most of them are locked from the outside in on that. I think there are some schools that way, but I think others you can just walk right in.
Yeah, I mean, and I was told it was a Nampa district, so I don't know. Maybe all the other schools are that way. And like I said, I don't know if it's high schools or just elementary schools. But
all right. Well, Tammy, do you believe
women talking, so.
Should there be armed guards? Would you support that?
Sure. I mean, I think that we should do whatever we need to do to take care of our children, but I don't know if a guard would be good, because what if the kid was in the other end of the school and the guards were in the other end? I mean, it still would take them time to get down there.
Sure.
Or I agree with teachers being armed, too, if that's what they choose to do.
Right. They have to be willing to do that, though.
Yeah.
Can't force them. No, can't force them.
Yeah.
Well, Tammy, thank you for listening to KIDO Talk Radio.
Yep.
All right. Quick draw. Hank, hang on. More of your phone calls next, and we'd love to hear from some educators as well on whether or not armed guards would add to a level of security, whether or not armed teachers would add to a level of security. You're listening to Kevin Miller on KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Maggie.
Good morning.
And such a blessing to be with you. Thank you for starting your day on the right side. Kevin Miller in the morning. Our time is 6:36. Let's go to Hank in Boise. Always has the commentary on KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Hank.
Good morning. I think that there's a connection between Brad Little not showing up at the gun rally in Nampa, plus Chairman Lurcher's behavior in the legislature trying to discredit Gary Pruitt. And I think that the reason, then the connection is Butch Otter. Butch's strategy basically is to kill the bill in committee and not allow it to go out on the floor. And if Little had shown up to the thing, it would have been very hard for Little to dodge the question of whether or not he would support the Castle doctrine. If he'd come out openly for it, it would have totally undermined Butch's strategy of killing the bill in committee. It would have given additional momentum. So I think that Butch sent the word to Brad not to show up, and I think Lurcher's behavior has to do with basically him and little Scotty Becky over there in the House doing Butch's bidding over there in the House, and I think that basically. I think that they think they can kill the bill without going to the floor. If it goes to the floor, a lot of people who are privately against the bill would be forced to vote for it in public for political reasons. And the same thing with the governor. So the strategy is to try to kill it right in the committee before it gets on the floor. And
well, that's been but that's been the modus operandi for Betke and everybody
Butch.
and the governor. By the way, here's the other one. The governor's making his last rounds. His run's over. Now, will he be an effective force in the primary? I'm not sensing that, and that's a break before. I thought that the governor was the Hulk Hogan of Republican politics, but in this primary season, I don't know if the governor is going to be a powerful force. Maybe money-wise, but I don't think he's in touch.
It's definitely the money going to Little is basically Butch's entertainment.
But I don't think he's in touch with the people. Now, before he could get away with that, I don't see that. When you have Tommy Ahlquist saying repeatedly, we want a governor who's engaged, that's a message, and it's resonating. Your thoughts, Hank?
I think you have a certain amount of truth to it, but also too, Butch feels it's better to work behind the scenes, and I think that the fact that Brad's not going there was a sign of Butch's manipulation in the situation. I think that basically he's trying to keep his hand hidden.
I can't really speak to that. I I'm going to take people at their word on that one, Hank. What about arming teachers?
I believe in arming teachers, but I also feel that they should have automatic locked doors, and they should have somebody at the window, maybe in bulletproof glass or something in there where they can check the people, anybody coming in during school hours. So there is having somebody at the window. I think that's the best overall approach. I agree with arming teachers, but the problem is a lot of the teachers are liberal in their opinion are anti-gun, and I think that you're going to have difficulty. You're going to have a full-fledged campaign on the Idaho Education Association and the NER against arming teachers, and I think that you're going to have to approach it from the ability of keeping the schools locked during school hours.
Well, here it comes down to it. What type of state are we? And Greg Pruitt and and Seth and the Idaho Second Amendment Alliance have really done something that the political establishment, they don't like. But really, are we the state of these companies that ban or that are denying the NRA discounts? Or are we the state of, if you want to open carry, you want to conceal carry, we trust the citizens of our state? Really, where are we? Are we purple or are we red?
Well, I think that there's a little bit of both. Basically, the squishiness comes from the Republican establishment. The Democrats are not enough of a factor in this to matter. The real problem is that the establishment is like Butch and crew are more corporate oriented than corporate and crony oriented than they are.
Well, but his run's over.
Well, his run is over, but he's still playing an influential role. I think that what's going on now with the Lurcher thing, I think it has to do with tactics on the part of Butch. If they can discredit Greg Pruitt and they can do these dirty stuff behind the scenes, they'll certainly do it. And I don't think Lurcher's acting by himself in this. I think that Lurcher started out as a solid conservative early in his career, and like a lot of them, just like, for instance, Moyle would be another example. The pressure comes on. If you want to keep your leadership, chairman, or your chairmanship, you're going to have to play ball with the governor.
But in a final thought here, Hank, because you bring up a good point, when you have this is weird how, again, that video that was released, that you have Mike Moyle, the House Majority Leader, saying that the governor told him what he will and won't accept. Well, the governor is not the boss of the legislature, and maybe that's how things have run for 12 years. And then when you have Congressman Labrador saying, I'm going to work with these folks instead of telling people what to do, these are shots against, your favorite governor, Governor Otter.
Well, yes, it is. But remember, Moyle, his wife was appointed to one of the state commissions, and that was the payoff to Moyle. And Moyle isn't going to buck the boss, because basically the boss, his wife could very well lose her position if he bucks the boss. I mean, it's in other words, Moyle's been compromised. I hate to say that, because I was a supporter of his, and I worked with him a few years back, and I'm sorry to see what happened to him, but this is inevitable with a lot of these people down there, which is pretty much corrupted the legislature down there.
Well, Hank, we shall stay tuned. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Again, this program is always about opinion. We welcome your opinion at 580-5436, 580-KIDO. And it's a shame that apparently we will not have a repeal of the grocery tax this legislative session. And when we can give money to this project and that project, and it seems strange to me that we have more money than we know what to do with, and yet there's no talk of giving the folks a break. We're talking about giving businesses a break. By the way, Dave Petzel will join us. We'll talk a little bit about that. But again, at 580-5436, 580-KIDO, I sit there and I think to myself, there's an issue here, a great disconnect, right?
No, of course I won't resign. It was a shameful letter. It was politically motivated. I never met that man. He doesn't know anything about me. And the letter was full of misinformation. I wrote a letter back to the governor. I talked about all the mistakes that Hager made in his letter. It was a shameful, politically motivated letter that had no facts. And, of course, I won't resign.
Right. It goes on and on and on, and people are going back and forth on this. But as the NRA has pointed out, there are 5 million good, loyal NRA members. I don't think the killer was a member of the NRA, right? By the way, thank you, Hank, for getting us distracted. We are asking about arming teachers, and we are asking about armed guards. By the way, there is a poll at KIDOTalkRadio.com if you would like to weigh in. Let's go to Darren, who's a teacher. Darren, good morning. You're on KIDO Talk Radio with Kevin Miller.
Howdy. Yeah, I think I've heard a number of people say that you have to lock up the school, have one entrance in, one entrance out, buzzer people in. That's not a bad thought. The only problem is that there's always a weakness, there's always a flaw. Most of the schools were not built to stop a shooter from coming in. I know we looked at our school, and typically in a building you've got 6 or 7 entrances and exits. So it's hard to monitor all of those. Then you have a kid who decides he's going to go out to the parking lot and get something out of his car. The door is locked, but he props it open with, and I've got kids doing this, they prop it open with something so he can come back in. Or what if the shooter is a student? The Lanza case in Sandy Hook, that was an example. They had the buzzer system. He still got into the school. Person shows up. How do you know the student? A man shows up. How do you know he's a parent or not? How does a kid opens a door and somebody just slips in through that opening to get into the building? So it's not a bad idea like having an armed guard. But then again, the guard can't be everywhere. Guards are sick. We have an SRO officer at our school, but then he's not always there. So I think people just have to realize that there's no one easy answer that's going to solve all of your problems.
Well, that's the case, and how do you bring order to things? And you have many schools around here that have the open campus. Yeah,
it's hard, and I know we've looked at our campus. Unless you put up, but maybe that's what needs to happen. I'm in favor of arming teachers. If they allow that policy at my school, I would willingly undergo whatever training is necessary. I do own guns, and I've handled guns. I go shooting on a regular basis, and to me, it seems like that's the logical. It's like when I started hijacking airplanes. There's always a pilot on the plane. There may or may not be an air marshal. There may or may not be any other, but you know that there's always a pilot on the plane. So the most logical answer is to arm the pilot. You don't necessarily need to arm everyone. And I would say the same thing for teachers. There's always a teacher in every classroom. There may or may not be that SRO officer. Locks may or may not work, but the bottom line is that there's always a teacher in every classroom. And if you shoot that down, it seems to me you're not grasping what is the most logical answer to the problem.
Well, Darren, thanks for all you do, and thank you for listening to KIDO Talk Radio.
Yeah, thanks. Bye.
All right, let's get back to it. 580-5436, 580-KIDO. And a young man just emailed me in saying, look, how about mandatory service could go a long way in disqualifying someone who can own a firearm, as well as guardians with weapons at school? Just a thought. So we'll get your thoughts on that, mandatory service. Think about that. That's next. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio.
Reporting from the top of the show by Matt Finn that there are serious questions about the Sheriff's Department, not only their response to the shooting with this one school resource officer standing outside, but the dozens of times that officers went to this shooter's home and did nothing. Is that where the conversation should be, or is it time to have...
That is definitely where the conversation should be. And it absolutely outrages me that on the CNN town hall, we had the sheriff who was virtue signaling against the NRA and against guns when he didn't even act properly. The armed officer at our school waited outside, and then the sheriff and his men for 4 minutes let my classmates die while he sat outside and waited. He didn't even do his job properly, and then he comes around and turns around saying guns are the issue when he failed to act properly.
There we have it from our friends, Fox and Friends, over the weekend. Kevin Miller in the morning, continuing to take your calls on arming teachers. By the way, this is the sheriff. He says, don't blame me.
As I said, I'm the sheriff. My name's on the door. The people responsible are the ones who took the calls and didn't follow up on them, as it was with the FBI, as it was with any person. Leaders are responsible for the agency, but leaders are not responsible for a person. I gave him a gun. I gave him a badge. I gave him the training. If he didn't have the heart to go in, that's not my responsibility.
There we have it. I'm glad he's owning up to it. Let's get more of your phone calls here. Linda in Caldwell with Kevin Miller on KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Linda.
Good morning, Kevin. I wanted to know why wouldn't they think about putting scanners? You know, you go to the courthouse, you go to the airport, all those places. Why don't they put those things in the school? That way, everybody who comes through, their bags are checked through, they're checked through. And looks to me like that'd be a whole lot easier. And then after the kids are all in, lock the doors.
That's a very good point. In fact, the president said that, you know, we can protect our courthouses, we can protect our airports, but we can't protect our schools. Why don't we have the same thoughts, right?
Yeah. Why not? Because our school puts in money all the time. And the senior citizens are paying, and they ain't even got any kids in school.
Well,
Plus a lot of other people that don't have children. So I should have the right to say, okay, you want this amount of money? Okay, this is what I demand. I demand a scanner that everybody walks through, because otherwise you'll have the same same thing going on.
Well, it does come down to, you know, what are we willing to do? So are you down with arming teachers?
I don't see any sense in arming the teachers. They got enough. They got enough on them teaching the kids and everything. And then what if some kid happens to get a little bit over friendly and takes the gun? Are they going to have the gun locked up all the time?
We'll throw your points out, Linda. Thank you for listening to KIDO Talk Radio.
You bet. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, 6:58, time for traffic and weather. And coming up, we'll talk to Dave Petzo. Interest rates the highest they've been in 10 years. What does that mean about your ability to borrow money? Because where would we be without borrowing money? And once again, we'll continue our series on debt and the deficit. When will the country do anything about it? Or are they going to wait till it's too late, a.k.a. what Greece did, right? Don't forget, currently, 67% of you believe that teachers should be armed in Idaho schools. We'll continue to get your thoughts throughout the morning. Thanks for waking up on the right side. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio.